Now, as part of an effort to revive the international nuclear deal with Iran and Russia, Russia has discussed a possible interim agreement with Iran. The proposal will result in limited sanctions relief in return for reimposing some restrictions on Tehran's nuclear program. The reports come as concern grows within the Biden administration. The time is running out on negotiations between Iran and the world powers over a full return to the 2015 nuclear deal. The Trump administration had withdrawn the U.S. from the deal in 2018, and Iran is reportedly closer than ever to attaining the ability to manufacture nuclear weapons. Sources say Iran has so far rejected the proposal presented by Russia. The Iran Permanent Mission to the United Nations says Tehran does not want an interim deal and has declined to discuss the specifics of the Russian proposal. All right, to talk a little bit more about this, Nicole Grajewski is a research fellow with the International Security Program at Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. She joins me from Cambridge in the United States. A very warm welcome to you, Nicole, and I hope I have pronounced your surname correctly. What do you make of the situation?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. In terms of the situation with the interim proposal from the Russians, it seems like Iran has definitely rejected this. This is quite predictable, given that Iran would seek a full return to the JCPOA from the United States. And in terms of the Iranian political establishment, many view this as kind of the Russian attempt to take advantage of Iran.
In what way?
Well, traditionally, Russia and Iranian relations have been fraught with some tensions, especially in terms of Russian imperialism in Iran and Russia's disagreements with Iran over the nuclear deal previously. So with the Bushehr nuclear reactor and Russian delays on that, Iran often viewed Russian involvement in its civilian nuclear energy industry as connected to the international outrage over Iran's nuclear program. In Vienna right now, Russia is serving as somewhat of the intermediary between Iran and the European nations and the United States. So Russia has assumed quite a prominent role in this, and conservatives and some reformists in Iran have viewed this as kind of through the way of tensions historically through the relationship. In terms of the interim agreement, it's undesirable for Iran because Iran does seek full sanctions removal from the United States.
Now, the hostage for U.S. citizens, is that central to the talks at the moment? Because there seems to be a difference of opinion about whether or not they are two separate issues or they are related, and if they could help bring about a deal.
Well, this has been what the Biden administration has stated as recently, I think as yesterday, that the hostages, American hostages in Iran, are linked to any kind of improvement in the current situation over the negotiations to the U.S. return to the JCPOA. Iran doesn't necessarily view it in that sense. This could be leverage in terms of negotiations, but Iran has been quite adamant, and this is emblematic of the rhetoric that you've seen coming out of Iran on some of these maximalist demands. And so potentially moving on the hostage situation would be viewed as somewhat of a breaking away from Iranian maximalist demands.
And this is a point that some observers have made, that why should this be part of the negotiations when the original deal in 2015 did not have this at its center, and that there are political prisoners, quote unquote, of other countries that are in Iran? Well,
as part of the JCPOA initially did include the release of several hostages, American hostages. This wasn't directly in the agreement, but it was part of the political discussions that did result in the JCPOA. So this would obviously be a move of goodwill on behalf of the Iranians, but Iran has traditionally used hostages as a political chip in terms of its bargaining position. So this could be linked to negotiations, but at the moment, the Iranians are saying this is not the case.
I mean, other countries have lamented the slow pace of the talks. Iran has in turn said that it's the US that is not ready. It's drafted several parts of the agreement that it sees as outstanding issues, which the United States says it will not entertain. Where do you see this going?
Well, there seems to be some improvement. There was an indication today from the Iranian Foreign Ministry that they would potentially be prepared to discuss these issues with the United States directly. So far in negotiations, the United States and Iran have not sat across each other at the negotiation table. And this is why states such as the European Union states and also Russia and China have been serving as kind of these outsized roles between the United States and Iran and going in between the two countries.
And I saw news suggesting that South Korea has announced that it's paid Iran's dues to the United Nations, $18 million, thus reinstating Iran's UN voting rights. What would be the effect of this in terms of its weight, its strength in the talks?
Well, these are frozen assets, Iranian assets in South Korea, and this is perhaps somewhat of an indication of a bit of an improvement, but it's not going to play a major role in swaying whether or not the talks will proceed in a proper direction. It is linked to, of course, Iran's role in the United Nations, and Iran lost its voting rights because of its inability to pay for its UN dues over sanctions. So this is a positive development, but it's not decisive in terms of the nuclear negotiations.
As you say, there has been some improvement, but many have said it's now or never. Your thoughts on this? What would make it move at a significant pace enough for those who have been watching to not get exasperated, that there is an actual proper deal that would appeal to all parties to earnestly and negotiate as sincerely as possible, so to speak?
Well, certainly direct engagement between the United States and Iran would be fruitful. This would be a way to kind of fuse some of the challenges that we've been seeing so far, especially with Iranian enrichment and perhaps halting and not breaching that 90% enrichment that keeps on being discussed, which could potentially provoke a military strike. This would obviously not be desirable. And the United States maybe perhaps some goodwill on some of these projects that are linked to the JCPOA, such as the Fordo project on conversion to medical isotopes, perhaps removing those sanctions as an indication of going back to the deal and as returning to full compliance on both sides.
And will there be sustainable economic benefits of this?
Of course, Iran would hope so. Even though in 2015, after the JCPOA was agreed, Iran didn't really reap the economic benefits that it thought. Many European countries were hesitant to be involved in the Iranian market. And of course, with the Trump administration's secondary sanctions, this has even intensified that more so. The economic benefits would certainly enable Iran to forge trade relations. This would help with its relations with China, especially, and some foreign investment, even with Russia. But it's to be determined. And I think the Iranian market does face the potential, skeptical view of potentially the United States leaving the deal once again.
What about the regional players who were caught in the conflicts, especially with the hardball during the Trump administration? How can they help the situation along?
Well, it's been quite advantageous that the United States has taken a little bit of a restrained view in the Middle East. This has prompted the Iranians to reach out to the Saudis and the Saudis to reach out to the Iranians, as well as the United Arab Emirates. But still, Iran's relations with Israel is an issue, and that is something that is exacerbating the tensions in the region. Israel, many former Mossad and Israeli intelligence agents have said that the deal is a positive step for regional stability. It's not a perfect deal, but it would be conducive to regional stability. So with that in mind, this could be something that is an indication that perhaps regional players do see somewhat of a normalization of relations as a benefit between Iran and the international community.
I mean, some have said the past 3 years has really brought to light what they see as a lose-lose situation. And it's quite an intriguing situation in the sense that it's very rare that we see China and Russia a little bit more sympathetic to Western allies, objectives here, given the fact that they have no interest in Iran with nuclear potential.
Certainly, neither Russia nor China seeks to see a nuclear Iran, especially Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. For Russia, especially, a military intervention is equally as disastrous in terms of regional implications. So Russia neither wants Iranian breakout with a nuclear weapon, nor a military intervention by the West to stop this kind of nuclear breakout. And so that's a delicate balance. But Russia and China have expressed their reservations when it came to Iran's increased enrichment and some of its reneging on some of its commitments with the JCPOA, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your insights, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Grajewski is a research fellow with the International Security Program at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. She speaks to us from Cambridge in the United States.